from that space, we're always looking for that flow in our own lives. Where does energy flow? Where is it taking us? And as we kind of relax into energy, we start to be very present to where that flow goes, where it gets stuck in us. And that stuckness is usually what we're all learning about. We spend more time bringing our attention to where we're stuck than when we're flowing. Because when we're flowing, it's easy. There's nothing to work on. There's nothing to really do. If there's the arising of action inside us, then we take care of something. And there's just not the struggle that so much of life is lost in. And there is a lot of struggle that goes on because we're fighting ourselves. We think that we're fighting something else, but we're not. We're really just fighting ourselves. The more we let go of that internal fight where we find where we're blocked in our own energetic flow, these are things go in our lives. And this really is my basic definition of energy. Energy is simply the interconnectedness of everything. It is consciousness in its purity. It's everywhere. It's moving all the time. It may be moving really slowly, even if it's a rock. But that rock is still moving in its own way and growing and shifting and shaping. But now the years are spanned out, before you really see it, as it, crumbles into dust and is reformed to something else. And that goes over millennia for a lot of things. And I think that's something else to be mindful of, is that there are much bigger flows going on in the universe. And even if any of us make it to 100 years old, that's a really small amount of time. So we always kind of have to be mindful of that, be aware that there's bigger things going on in our life, bigger flows taking us to different places. And so that's kind of a starter to it. And the world of energy is pretty diverse, and I know from the registration forms that we've got a lot of different experiences with energy. Some people who are very well versed, who are energy healers, so some of what I'll say will be pretty much redundant to what you already know, not necessarily in a bad way, but they'll be reminders, although I hope to have a few other things that add on to it. But that's the point of having something like this, and I tend to have more time for questions because we're going to have a lot of experiences with energy. There's some people who are brand new to it, and some people who've just had incredible energetic experiences, and they're like, what was that? And so we'll have a chance to kind of talk about that. And Steve, I see you have a question in there, but I'll get to that point in a little bit. So really, the first step is just paying attention to ourselves, to our own energy. Until we really understand our own energy, it's tough to really understand what's going on around us. And it's too easy to blame stuff that's going on around us as being the source of being drained by something or being supported by something. So much of the initial things, as I said, are dealing with our own blockages, because we like to go, whenever we close down, we can no longer receive. We're not receiving from the universe. We're not receiving from ourselves. And so there's the illusion here that we're being hurt by something. So we always have to be mindful of this, because so much of our reactions to life, anytime things get a little uncertain, we get a little scared, we pull in. Nothing can flow, right? All the dams go up, the river is stopped. So then we come back in our own work to be more conscious, like, well, where did all this stop? And this is why we do a lot of kind of going back into childhood with a lot of the sessions that I have, because we're going back to where the dam originally got built, because that's where it started to divert the water in a different direction. Right, that water, that energy, that's the flow of life. So you said, well, I can't go this way. I'm scared of this. Something traumatic happened. And it can be a very good reason. It's not necessarily bad per se. We don't think of right and wrong in the same way, and good and bad in the same way. We simply say that something got stopped. And so then we come back and say, well, why is this here? Is this actually appropriate for me? Is this actually keeping me from what I really love and really where I really want to flow in life? So then we start to break that down. What is this? What is this dam that's stopping me from flowing in a particular direction? And so we're mindful of it. And energy initially, it really is that kind of soft awareness. We're not trying to blow up things or heal things, blow up blockages. Like, I'm just going to douse it with all this megawatts of energy coming through me. And I think there can be out there for some energy healers who are very powerful because they just naturally, for whatever reason, they just conduct all kinds of stuff through them. It's just really easy for them to do that. And these are different types of energy healers, different orders, just different intensities. This is where I kind of come back to the tree metaphors. It's like they're different trees that serve different functions. It doesn't mean that, one's better than the other. A sequoia tree isn't better than a cherry tree. They're just different. Same for energy healers. Certain people, can pull in and hold certain types of energy and be able to offer that in ways that are healing to others. And so you get different kind of levels. Sometimes I use like metaphors of different transmitters, to get into electrical engineering. Different ones can handle certain amounts of volts, certain watts, and amps and all that. And so too with people. We're just kind of our natural things. But to really get into that space of finding out what our natural flow is, once again, you come back to these blockages, you find out where you got stuck. So as you figure out where you got stuck, you're like, okay, this is the thing. This is where I got stuck. This is where I stopped flowing. How can I open back up to that energy? And a lot of times that's initially very challenging. It may not come quickly. A lot of what happens in the spiritual awakening where all this energy is really moving and people have all kinds of different energetic experiences, it's more like, a deeper floodgate within you just got opened and now it's hitting all the other dams constantly, simultaneously at once. And you've got this kind of force coming at you. Maybe some of you kind of feel that. Somebody who are already in tune to energy and are in tune to my energy feel as like, you're like, what was that? That's why you can't really get into the symptoms too much, the spiritual awakening symptoms, because, it's energy. We're all energy, so you can literally feel anything on any level in yourself. So I'm not going to say that, you're in an awakening if you feel lots of pressure on your forehead. It's like, well, maybe you have a headache. That happens too. But in the instance of like a spiritual awakening, it will be like, opening up your mind, opening up your inner vision, your inner wisdom. And these things happen. And so a lot of the other parts to being with energy is just letting go of fear and doubt, because that's one of the most fundamental blockages people have. They just get scared of it. It's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't like it. Where is it coming from? Why am I feeling this? And so you just kind of calm yourself, right? This is where we come back to the meditation stuff so much. It's not because meditation is always applicable, but it's a pretty useful thing to stop and say, what's going on? How am I feeling? I've often found my meditations allow my energy to settle or to self-regulate because I'm no longer caught up in other external things. And as my mind quiets down, I become more clear about what's moving, what's right, what do I need? All these types of things. Hi, Lynn. Why do we seem to feel energy from certain people more than others? Well, let's get back to that in a couple of minutes. I'm still just kind of finding the flow here as I'm talking. As I said, it really comes back to paying attention to yourself first. We can't get into the external too quickly. Like, if you're very new to energy, or even if you're not, if you got into energetic work with other people, so energy healers, Trish, you're asking about the concept, what do they do? They work with energy, they heal. So you hear people do Reiki, craniosacral therapy. Some people just call themselves energy healers. There's a lot of, in the Chinese work, like the Qigong movement stuff, Chinese medicine, working with the meridians in the body. Some of the Kabbalah works, they break the Kabbalah down into energetic stuff. I don't know how much energy healing per se they do, but that's kind of a quick mishmash of stuff that comes to mind immediately. And they just work with the energy. They're tuned to energy. They see it in other people. They understand it. And they can help it come back into that flow. And that's really a big thing, but more on that in a little bit. I always want people to understand that ultimately your system is very smart. Energetically, your system already knows how to come into balance. It knows what it feels like. It knows how that should look for itself. And most systems, unless they're really, really upset, will do so. And if it takes a while to start to get things flowing, that's okay, right? This is the importance of patience. We don't have to push anything. We don't have to try and get anywhere. And so as we kind of relax a little bit more, things become more obvious to us. The more we create tension, our own tension is our own type of resistance. So we can't really get into a deeper flow with ourselves. And so we keep relaxing into the space. We're saying whatever is arising, and that's fine. And sometimes that means there's discomfort that's arising. And so we kind of learn to be with that, to be with whatever is going on inside our space. Earlier today, I was working with one of my students, and I was just kind of helping her get in tune with herself, with that connection from the divine, which is always how we want to be thinking of connection. Ultimately, while we're all one with the grand consciousness, we're all energy. I've definitely found it helpful to have sort of a visualization where it's like I'm connecting to God, right, through the crown chakra, through the top of our heads, and I'm connecting to the earth through my feet, through the base of my spine. And that kind of sense of opening up to the fullness, but anchoring. Opening up to embrace everything, but still staying grounded in this moment, in this body. So we don't get washed away by the seas of consciousness and energy that's out there. So those are two of my main big suggestions. Like if you're going to do something, you need to have that kind of anchoring for yourself to really help yourself stay here, and then to really open up and receive. So that grounded, open vessel that can receive. It's the open-handedness. Now, Lynn, you had a question about, why do we feel energy more from some people than for others? And this isn't an answer I can give in a kind of general way, right? This is a specific thing. So you have to first know your own space and to be aware of your own issues, the things that you're open to, things you're close to, because then you'll start to better understand the people that you're drawing into your life. It's an important thing to kind of pay attention to, because the more you understand yourself, the more you understand the people that you're attracting to, the lessons that you're here to learn, then you start to understand what the energetic link is, why you feel more from somebody else. A lot of times it really is unhealthy attachment. Attachment is, in essence, we want something from someone else, whether it's their approval, their love, or we even want them to go away, right? There's some sort of tie-in there, and those are people often where we can feel them the most. Family is the best example of that. It's like there's all kinds of things going on in the family space that you get tied into. And because you're getting tied into all of that, you're getting pulled around energetically. You want something, they're not acting the way that you think they should be acting, and you feel these things moving inside you. Obviously, on the level of children, it's a deeper level of connection because of the investment of time and energy. And of course, if you're a mother, you've carried your child for 9 months, and then, you're raising somebody who's completely dependent on you. And that creates a whole other set of connections and attachments. And that's, a really big ball of wax where you're weeding out the attachments, your fears, and the other things you're projecting now onto your child with the deep level of love and bonding that happens. This is one of the stickiest things out there. And so pulling those apart helps you understand the energetic interplay that's going on between you, of why you feel certain things. Because mothers can be extremely sensitive to their child and can even know if something's going on with them when they're like, many, many years older, in their 50s or something, and they're miles and miles away, and something can happen, and a mother who's in her 80s will be like, oh, I feel something. And there are ways where love is always kind of an open doorway into connections with other people. Energy kind of has a couple of different feelings that are pretty predominant. One is heat. The more I get into an energy of myself in the space and any work I'm doing, whether it's kind of healing or teaching, and for me, healing and teaching are kind of the same. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But there's this heat, there's this energy starts to move inside, my body gets hot. As I've been talking to you, and we're about 20 minutes in, like there's more and more energy picking up inside me. And it's just kind of what I do as I kind of unfold into this space, into the work that I do and how I share with myself. Because as my students know, the way I often describe it is, is there's a deep connection that goes on in any session. It's just what is it is. It's this deep connection of us coming together, of God coming together, and that space is union, that space is love. That's what energy does. We are not actually localized beings. I think a couple of you have had experiences around that, and they've been kind of integrating this in your own life, where you find out that you're not just here. You're spread out everywhere. You're interconnected to everything, but you also are just here. It's the paradox of being in a body and being spirit at the same time. And that spirit connects to everything immediately. So heat, it's something that many of you will often feel. There can be kind of these pulsations that you can feel in your body, especially if something is getting blocked or unblocked. So it's like it's pulsing is kind of hitting something, right? It's kind of a little bit of a surge. With awakening specifically, it's like a wave. Waves kind of come through. And so that's a different thing. And for me, that usually was kind of felt like it was kind of going from head to toe, sometimes slow, sometimes fast. Another way is just there's kind of this, it does actually feel like my body vibrates. It feels like there's kind of this, if you can kind of get the feeling from my hands, kind of going on wherever things are shifting. And that to me feels kind of like, I don't know, it feels like it's a state change. So think of like ice going to water going to vapor. So there's just a lot of energy moving through that, but it's not necessarily smooth. And so there's a certain level of intensity going on. A certain level of purification is going on to move from a denser level to a higher vibration. And water is always one of my best metaphors for like changing a vibration. Is water vapor better than ice? No, it's just a higher vibration. And I really, really encourage you to let go of any of these ideas around being better. Because I hear that going on out there. It's like this idea that somehow I'm going to be a higher vibration and I'll be better. Like, it's just a higher vibration. And it's still all energy, it's still all interconnected. When people are really ungrounded in the awakening space, they kind of feel like they're going up and down like this. A lot of that's unavoidable, I think. That's my opinion. But this is also where like your own work, getting to know yourself, understanding what's pulling you back down. So when you hit the low point, you hit the nadir, you're like, oh, I came back here from my mother. She's like, you shoot back up after you clear it, right? And over time, it kind of gradually moves into a natural rhythm. Because we're always kind of shifting and growing. We're never coming to a static point. For people in awakening, that's an important thing to remember. That you're not coming to one static point. You'll come to a more natural resting rhythm as opposed to doing this. Feeling like a human yo-yo as you churn out all sorts of old issues. But, there's still a flow. So these are some initial thoughts. Steve, you had a question. Let me scroll back up down here. Those who give off energy and those who need to receive energy and projecting energy, those who feed off of it, and other people can be draining. Yeah, Steve, I'll be honest, I just think this is about your boundaries and getting to know yourself first, because all those things are true, but it's still you're too outwardly focused. You gotta bring it back to yourself. Start by like, what is healthy for me? What feels true to me? How do I take care of myself? And then, you start to kind of define your boundaries loosely. You're not trying to set hard walls against people. But understanding, like, where do I start and stop to some degree is important. Well, energy is interconnected and we do merge. We do set intentions about what's right to have in our space. So, like, some friends, you start to realize they're draining to you. You're like, you know what? I can't be friends with that person anymore. And other people, actually really supportive. And this becomes illuminating when you start to pay attention to this level of energy, because you're like, you know what, I want this person more in my life. So you're like, yeah, so let's hang out some more. So those are things to kind of start with. Most people aren't really maliciously trying to steal energy from others. And if you ever run across one of those, you just give them a wide berth. They're just not even worth getting involved with. That sort of energy vampire person out there that's really confused. It's a really confused soul who doesn't understand that with all of that, they're actually hurting themselves, because we're all interconnected. The more people get involved in, say, any sort of energy manipulation, the more they're just going to be hurting themselves and creating all sorts of really nasty karmic ties and attachments. For those of you who can kind of see energy or visualize it or sense it, to me, the way I sense that type of work when people are trying to control or manipulate, it's like wrapping yourself up with a lot of, black bandages and snakes. You're just completely intertwined with that and barbed wire. Those are really nasty, bad connections. Bad in the sense to get away from that word, but they're going to continue suffering. They're going to continue to perpetuate suffering in your life and their life. But it comes in the guise of controlling energy and controlling others. I've got another question. Says, does energy come from somewhere else, or is it coming from inside? Or is there no difference on an ultimate level? No, there's no difference on an ultimate level. The way I tend to think about it, as far as healing and working with myself, is I'm always attaching to a greater source. I'm attaching to the greatest source of energy, which is God. It's never coming just from me. Anytime you get it just coming just from you, you're liable to get yourself exhausted and worn out. We're finite beings. And ultimately, in connecting to God, I always feel like, that intelligence is working with me, so I know what's appropriate to do with my energy and how to help other people, or when not to help other people. Never forget, pain is one of the greatest teachers in this world. So many people need their pain. They need it to get so bad that it finally tips the scales and they realize that there's something seriously wrong and they need to make changes. And it's awful. It's not a lot of fun to see the stuff that goes down in this world. I mean, it's ridiculous. We create all of our problems. We don't have problems. We've got enough technology and wealth to solve just about every real, which is, food and health, water and shelter. We've got all those resources, but we're perpetually caught up in all these other painful games. And consequently, we have to honor that people believe in this pain and that we've believed in this pain. And so for those who are energy healers, there are times when you don't necessarily help somebody because there's a bigger plan at work, because the greater help is already there in many respects, even if it looks pretty awful and painful. But for us, when we do feel called to help, energy is always coming through. It's coming through from God. People are welcome to just say, I have a question, and I can unmute you too. But you can also write them out if you want. You can definitely feel energy in any part of you. I mean, that's just part of it, being interconnected. And it's just a question I have come up every now and then. I feel like I got an email a couple times a month where somebody's like, I'm feeling something like this energetically here. What does that mean? It's like, well, what does it mean to you? It sounds like a dodge, but it really is, reflecting you back to your own inner knowing. That's the most powerful place to go. And as I always like to encourage people whenever they're listening to me, it's like, I don't actually want you to just believe everything I'm saying. I want you to stay tuned into your inner knowing. Kind of the way I was talking about Mooji earlier. That's what I'm doing when I'm listening to his energy. I'm staying tuned into my own inner knowing to find what feels true and supportive to me. Because I don't assume that everything that comes out of his mouth is actually appropriate for me or even right for me. And the same goes for me. There's a lot of things that I say that'll be really helpful, but there are other things that are just my expression. If you're not tuned into this part of you, if you're not listening to your own energy and what's resonating, right, what's saying, that's right, then you don't really know what's right coming from anybody. And then you can be manipulated and confused by a society that's caught up in drugs, alcohol, things, new technology. There's always going to be something to tantalize you or titillate you, tantalize you. So much of this world is a distraction. So Steph has a question. After becoming more aware of my own energy, what do you suggest for more easily sensing other energies of people, environments, etc.? I think it kind of goes back, and Steve kind of alluded to this, goes back to what feels supportive and what feels draining. That is honestly the clearest way that I can express it. Because when you feel supported, there's a way that your energy kind of fills out, kind of opens. When you feel drained, it starts to close down and collapse. Now, as I said, knowing yourself helps you to understand how you open and how you close and collapse. Because when you're in your natural rhythms, you'll open naturally to where you're being supported, and you'll naturally set up boundaries to things that aren't supporting you. And then you'll probably leave them if you have the opportunity. So, for instance, if you're in a bad job that's really draining, the more you're naturally in your own state, you're more likely to leave that space because it's not healthy to you. And why would you stay in a place that's not healthy? It's like, why would you keep standing out in the rain shivering when you can go inside? But this is how it becomes so common sense. It starts to become so ridiculously easy. We all wonder how in the world we ever did this before. Right? So this, as you can see, this is why I keep pushing back to your own experience first, because once you have that clear internal barometer, then you can kind of come back out. A lot of people's biggest problems in the world right now is they can't handle love. They cannot handle love. If I say I love you, so many people, their hearts do this, right? And this is the wrong reaction, wrong in the sense that this isn't actually supporting the person. It's actually keeping this person from support. Every time you close up when you get near love, and this is common. This isn't this is the sad thing. It's really common. This isn't like a one-off thing. If any of you in there, if you're like, ooh, that's me, I do that. It's the problem is that's most people. And so there's a retraining, as I said, to say, oh, I feel love. Oh, okay, so I break this wall down, this instinct. Or it's not even an instinct. This is a programmed thing that's usually taught through childhood. Say you have to close up because you're not safe. And it often comes from childhoods where the child doesn't feel safe. And so the response becomes every time, somebody who loves me is near me, I'm getting hurt. And so they do this, which often means they end up also kind of having this other part of themselves that opens up when things are not healthy, because that's also part of that programming. So everything's kind of on its head. So you have to get it back off of its head. Now to get more to your question, Steph, because I don't want to seem like I'm dodging. I'm just kind of making sure the framework is set right. Once you're in that space, it really does become easy. And the more you clear out your own internal stuff, it's like you're wiping off the windshield. And so it's easier to see other people's energy. Personally, I'm going through another one of these shifts for myself where it's more things inside have shifted and broken down. And I'm starting to kind of sense energy and psychically get more information again, which is this is a whole other topic of how you get comfortable with a new level of awareness. Because I sometimes describe it, and I was describing this to one of my friends, it's like you've had your hands over your ears like this, and so you're used to hearing the world through this, and then you drop it, and then there's just so much more information and sound hitting you, and it's kind of disorienting. So you go through a disoriented phase where you're like, what does all this mean? How do I process this? What do I need to process? What is just general noise? So that happens, and then you notice more things about environments and energies. But there's also responsibility that comes with it, because we're not here to learn secrets about other people or hurt other people or manipulate other people. As I said, that just ties you up into more nasty, bad karma stuff that's going to be hurtful to everyone. Karma, as I said, we're not localized, which means when we do different, hurtful or cause suffering to ourselves or others, we're doing to everyone. And that's part of the laws of interconnection. Does that help a little bit, Steph? And for those of you who are sensitive to energy, just take some moments to kind of settle down a little bit more deeper as we're sitting here together. Because many of you already feel me energetically. You can kind of sense, a certain level of support and connection. This is always a great time to open to love, because that's the space that I'm working from. That's the only way you really can be a spiritual teacher, is from that space of love. And so you can start to tune in and start to allow yourself to relax, to receive the energy of the space. And it's not just my energy, okay? So it's your energy, it's the group's energy, it's my energy, it's God's energy. We all kind of come together. And so if you want to just relax. So a question from Joe: is it normal to have energy sensations come and go daily and weekly? Some days intense, other days I feel like it has left my body. Yep. It's all normal. really don't have a lot to say about that. They were always there. A lot of times, all that's happening is you now are aware of it. It's like there's always stuff going on in the kitchen. Now you turned on the light, and so you can see stuff is going on in the kitchen. Next question. Is that increased awareness something that arises spontaneously as part of your awakening, or did you cultivate it? Great energy. Thank you. Well, thank yourself, and thank the group, and thank God. We're all coming together. As I said, it's interconnection. This is the beauty of it. And as I'm calling your attention to this interconnected energy, that's going to build it a little bit more because I'm tuning you in. I'm encouraging you into that space. I don't answer too many questions about myself, partially because I don't want you focused on me. I want you focused on your path. And it doesn't really matter if something spontaneously arises or if it's cultivated. I think in life it's always kind of both, right? The spontaneous arising of something is the fact that it's already here. Energy is already here. The awakened state is already here. You don't go anywhere to get it, right? That has to be the first. That comes first. You have to understand that first. You can't go the other way. I see other people trying to do it the reverse, and they're miserable. They spend 30 years cultivating the awakened space and energy and awareness and stuff. And they get some stuff. They get some more, kind of knowledge about themselves. They become more conscious. But then they get here after 30 years, and they're like, well, crap. I don't feel awake, and life's still tough, and all these other things externally focused. It's because they were going out. They thought this other thing would get them there through cultivation and practice and all that stuff, and that doesn't get you anything. Meditation creates space for peace and for arising. It doesn't make awakening happen. In fact, most people I've talked to didn't have an awakening during meditation. I think we got a couple people on there that I know of that's not how awakening came for them. It certainly didn't happen like that for me. I was lying on a hotel bed staring at the ceiling. But to the point of cultivation, I'm not saying it's not important. Cultivating space, cultivating awareness is a wonderful practice, especially in a society that does the opposite. It tries to ignore everything and cover it up. So being in that space helps us stay conscious of our needs in general. To me, it's more about self-care than it is about self-work. It's like, okay, what do I need to be healthy today? And so I get up, I take a shower, I have breakfast, I have my meditation. That to me is all part of that, internal self-cultivation, to stay clear, to stay aware of what my needs are, to see how I'm feeling. And in doing that, it does keep me clear. So if there's a question in there about, being in tune with awareness, then the cultivation really, to me, is helpful. It definitely keeps me tuned and primed. So I'm like, okay, so I can pretty much, jump into a session at any point during my day, and I don't really need to prep for it. I mean, every now and then that comes up for me, but for the most part, I'm just ready to go because I've been doing this and clearing my space. I know my issues. I know my triggers. If I ever get triggered sometime in my daily life, I can own it. I know what's mine. And so that's another big piece to doing energy work. So you have to know what's yours, because the deeper and deeper you work with somebody, if this is the path for you, the more deeply you're likely to get triggered inside yourself. So you have to know, oh, that was me, but you also can feel a lot what's going on with other people, because as you come down kind of the hierarchy, I'll loosely use that word, of healers and teachers, they really merge. So I'm more in the merged point where healing and teaching to me are the same because they're both energetic, right? So there's a way that this energy naturally comes out and sets a vibration, sets a pitch, and it's kind of like everybody else starts to sing along with me, right? So I don't sing your song, but I set the pitch. And so the words, that I use as a teacher can help you to understand how you're setting your pitch. The energy of me helps you to understand the deeper and truer pitch, right? It's already happening. Healing is already happening. And I've already had plenty of spontaneous healings in my sessions, because as we're sitting together, we bring our awareness together. That energy I talked about of how we all are coming together, it works right there too. And so suddenly things start bubbling up, and then whoop, something comes out. And down at the bottom doesn't mean somebody's just teaching, still working in the level of mind. Somebody's just healing, working in just energy in general, not in the way of a teacher. That's not bad. It's just we need all this. It's just a different level of awareness, different vibration. I have a question from Susan. How do you decipher the difference between your energy and what you're picking up that is actually someone else's energy? The highs and lows are exhausting. It just goes back to what I said in the beginning. You have to know your own issues. The more you do, the clearer it is what's external. And for my experience, is like each time you drop through another blockage, another veil of illusion, something that you didn't know about yourself, whether it was a fear of doing something or some sort of desire, something you wanted from the world. These are veils, right? They keep you focused and looking at the world in a certain way. When they break away, you see more and you can feel more. So you get disoriented, then you get reoriented, and it becomes clearer and clearer what's going on with yourself versus what's going on with another person. And so that's the internal work is just central to it. There's no way around that. It's not a science to decipher, is this your... The more you understand what you get hooked on in others, you'll know when you're getting activated. And so if that comes up, you say, oh, this is hitting one of my hooks. And if you're in a healing session, don't worry about it too much unless you really feel like you're getting drawn in. And then there are times when you say, I can't handle this and I need to step out. It's all kind of at play, and you just have to be mindful of that in yourself. And as far as the highs and lows, if we're talking about spiritual awakening, if you're still going through those, don't heal. That's not the time for it. You're still figuring yourself out. If you're talking about the highs and lows of being in this energy and then stepping out of it, I think that's where the self-care and the cultivation that was in an earlier question comes into it. That, to be able to mindfully step in and out if you're going through such intense differences between when you're in the healing session versus when you're on your own. That's important. Another question says, being aware of my energy and that of others is a wonderful feeling. It is something I feel from the inside. Is there a practice to visually see energy? No, I mean, if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. I'd be careful about how much you enjoy this feeling, because energy is energy. It's like there's positive, negative stuff that moves around. So it's just, I don't want you to get caught up in the idea that things should feel a certain way. This happens a lot on the spiritual path, where people decide that a certain feeling, a certain high state experience is spiritual and something else is not. It's like it's all spiritual. It's all part of the grand fabric of life. Now, certainly kind of going back to how I've talked about before, we start to be aware of who feels supportive to us, and we definitely encourage that supportiveness, because that does feel good. That's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to connect energetically with somebody else. But then the more able you are to connect deeply with others, the more important it is to know how to step back out into your own space. So you don't get lost in somebody else. You don't get hooked into somebody else. Because it's kind of one of those things where, 2 blocks of ice don't really connect very deeply, right? But, at the level of water, things start to flow through, but we're human beings, so we also need to flow out and come back into our own space, to be clear about what is ours. You can see it in a romantic partnership is some of the worst, where people get really intertwined in each other's stuff. Like they start to take on each other's issues. It's like when you start to hear, one of your parents talking like the other parent. You're like, you're not saying the same thing, but you don't actually believe that, but they've absorbed that issue, and now they're kind of funneling through that, because they haven't been taking care of their own space. And so as we get to water vapor, the next level up from water itself, there's even more interconnection, which can feel even more intimate and close and wonderful. And when I say intimate, it just means connected. It just means union. That alone feels amazing. And you can have that with anyone. And you can have it in different levels and different ways, and it's awesome. It's not just a romantic thing. I think a lot of people will have challenges appreciating that, especially in the awakened space, because we've got all these other hard ideas about how and when we're supposed to feel certain things and certain levels of connection, which is usually linked up to the heterosexual male-female paradigm of romance and lifelong partnership, right? That's our small little blocks for intimacy and energetic connection. And that's not the only place where that happens. Thank you for your question. What other questions do people have? You want me to unmute you, Trish? All right, I just unmuted you. Let's see if it works.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Trish.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Were you able to hear me? Okay,
Yes.
Great. I wanted to share about the idea of sometimes I might say wake up in the morning feeling depressed, or at a given time of day I might all of a sudden feel something very strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's come to me recently that I tend to put a meaning to it that's personal. Like I might say with a depressed feeling, I might say think of things and put a meaning to it because I have to have a logical explanation for it. But really, in some ways, it's not even my own thing, and I'm starting to not have a personal attachment to the feeling that comes in and just think with curiosity, okay, this is here right now, and just feel it and feel what it does. And often the energy feeling, like say the feeling of depression, is actually an opportunity for the opposite, for opening or for somehow transforming the energy into have an opening. And in some ways I almost feel like I later find out that something catastrophic happened in the world or something along those lines, and somehow I feel like as though I have opportunities to help transform energy spontaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen that as a different way of seeing when things come about, and just to deal with that. And then also when I'm in a given situation, I used to really be resistant to other people's energies, to feel like I had to have these boundaries and walls. And I've been starting to realize that reality is just every moment.
Yeah.
And in that moment, there sometimes just is no separation, or maybe not even sometimes. Just that in this moment, there is all of these different energies, and that actually is me, because there is only one consciousness that somehow has the impression that it is a multitude of different consciousness.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
So that's just what I wanted to share, and just thought I'd wanted to see what your thoughts were on that.
Well, as I said, we always start with understanding our space and what's right for us. Because while it is all consciousness, it is all oneness, we're mindful of what's not appropriate, like rapists and other really nasty people, right? This is not appropriate. So I always bring this level back in, because I don't want to see it floating out too far. And I hear that happen in spiritual conversations. I don't think that's where you are, but because there's other people, and some people are new to me, new to these conversations, I want to be clear about that. But to your point, yes, it is all consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's just a different aspect of ourselves that we're getting to know. I really love what you said about just being present to that feeling of depression. One of the things that I've noticed, and I really encourage people as they get to know themselves, is to start de-linking things inside, because our bodies, emotions, and our mental stories get caught up in this cycle, right? So one triggers, it hits another domino, it hits another, and they just start going like this, right? I feel depressed, something else comes in, it's because of this, something else comes in, I don't like this, right? And so this whole thing gets going. Just stopping when that depressed feeling comes up and being curious can be transformative. It's, to me, and I intend to set up a workshop, an online workshop for this, for letting go of resistance and difficult issues. This is actually the moment to let go of something, right? It's not when life is easy, it's when it's right here. It's like you can get inside this thing when it's here. When that depression is here, whether anxiety or fear or anger or sadness, whatever it is. And it's like you can kind of breathe into this little pocket in here and start to dissolve it from the middle. And when you be present with it, when you get inside of it, Trish, it's like if there is a story that you need to know about, it will come up. So as opposed to layering a story on top, we're breaking open the egg to see what the story actually is that's on the inside. And if that's an arising of joy, or if it's an arising of fear, or if it's an arising of an old childhood trauma, or whatever is in there, it'll come up, it'll be very clear.
I've been finding that too, just having the acceptance and the openness. brings about things that I've been hiding or that sort of thing. So it's been a great few weeks opening up to the present moment in that way.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Do other people have some questions or would like to actually talk to me? And it is wonderful to hear your stories too, because there's so much wisdom in this little chat room, this webinar. And I don't pertain to have it all. As I said, ultimately you have your own inner knowing. This resonance, that's that energy in you. And that energy arises when truth and love are really present, especially in others, because I think there's this our own desire to connect, to reconnect with others into that deep pool, that deep lake, that ocean of consciousness. And so it starts to bubble up. Sometimes people feel energy like that. They feel like it's this bubbles kind of hitting things. As I said, you can feel it all sorts of different ways. And I probably have time for 2 more questions as we're getting near the end of the hour. Or you can just sit in the energy, as some of you already have been doing. Because we're not in separate places, and that's the beauty of it. We're not in Oregon, we're not in Florida, we're not in California, we're not in Norway. We're all together, we're all one. Just kind of melting back into that consciousness together. There's usually some quote going around on the internet that we're all just walking each other home. I don't remember what the quote's coming from. But I always kind of like that feeling that we're all just coming home together. And whenever life is getting crazy out there, because there's always going to be something going on. There's always going to be a disaster somewhere. And we do tune in, to different things as we get energetically open. I'm very conscious of city energies, depending on the city I'm in. And so there's some places I really don't spend a lot of time in, just because it feels heavy and dense and it doesn't feel supportive to me. But nonetheless, I continue to do my own work to be clear inside, because the more clear you are inside, the more the outside world can affect you. It just passes through because you're clear. Where you have resistance, that's where something can hit something to ring a chord. On the webinar invite that I originally had, down at the bottom I had 2 blogs. I definitely encourage you to read them if you didn't see them when you're registering. One was called The Nature of Energy, and the other is called The Energy Roller Coaster, or something to that, talking about the shifts of awakening. In awakening, it's different because the intelligence that's been kind of locked up is now let loose. So that's why there's kind of initially this kind of huge shock, and it can be very different. Some people get that bliss state initially for a little while, other people don't. But they'll get it later after they've healed and cleaned out a lot of stuff. Usually what awakening really does is just take you towards your heart, towards whatever it is that you truly want to do. That's really where, anytime you're holding on, anytime you're resisting, it just gets really, really painful. Because you're really clear that you're resisting yourself. And for those that are going to be energy healers, it can be particularly difficult, partially because you've got to be purified to whatever level of work you need to do. For me, I work in the energy of the white light, which is all bands and frequencies of light. So that's why, there's a question about, my own cultivation of awareness. I mean, part of it is I'm tuning into like how I am and the work I'm supposed to do. And I was also cleaning out a whole lot of impurities so I can do the type of healing teaching that I'm meant to do. And you always have some choice about how much you embrace something. That's part of living, you know, so it's not like it's fatalistic and you're just going to go to a certain level. There have definitely been times I know in my own process where I've kind of had that little voice in my head say, so do you want to continue? And I just kept saying yes. And I know, like, at least one of my friends here who's on this, you know, is like, well, why wouldn't you say yes? Because you keep feeling so much better each time you drop another layer of illusion out, another issue out. There's no reason to, like, hold on to anything and just keep saying yes. And a lot of times that takes a certain level of courage. So I just encourage all of you to have that courage, you know, especially if you're an awakening. And if you're not, don't worry about it. Like, a spiritual awakening right now, at least where I live, it's become like this new buzzword. So everybody's awakened this, talking about awakening that, and they don't even know what it is. A lot of people say awaken when they mean becoming more conscious, and that to me is very different. So being awakened is really knowing the truth, knowing what love is. Doesn't mean you're perfect, doesn't mean you're fully conscious. You can have a lot of darkness and impurity inside you that you're suddenly, like, you know, aware of. It's like the light turns on and suddenly, wow, look at the mess in here. But, you know, being conscious means maybe the light hasn't turned on, but you're open in the blinds, right? So more of God's light can shine. And hopefully, you know, when they spark that, then that internal light that shines on everything. And you're cleaning up the mess. That's becoming more conscious. Doesn't mean the darkened house is bad either. I just trying to give you some metaphors for how I'm talking about this. See a couple more things. So if you have questions that don't apply to this meeting, you know, feel free to email me. There's another question. When people talk about sensing others' energies, what specifically does that mean? I get confused because it sounds kind of vague to me. Well, it's energy, so it's not like something you can pour in a bottle. So you just get a sense of it. It's just a feeling. It's like, you know, it starts with knowing your own. So, like, if you're not sure what it's like to sense other people's energies or how you're interacting with them, you have to start with yourself. And so one of the little things that I like to do is to just sit here, and you can do like what I was mentioning before, where you connect to the divine, and then, you know, imagining you're connected to the earth. Close your eyes and start to focus on your hands. And just sit here and focus. And relax. Start to breathe. And just really focus on the sensations first, the actual physical sensations of your hands. And don't rush. Don't expect to feel anything immediately, but just kind of go slowly. And at some point, you may even start to visualize the energy is moving down through your head into your hands. And start to separate them. And you just kind of go and start to play with this space to see what it feels like. What's going on in here? So as I go and I get really connected, it starts to me feel like I'm pushing out a big marshmallow between them. So you start to just kind of get to know here. And as you get more comfortable here, right, and you're sensing your own energy, you can kind of start to pass it over to the rest of yourself to get kind of a sense of, like, how do you feel? This is very simple. You can just do it in your own space. I encourage you to do it after meditation. Because the more you understand yourself, once again, the more you can understand how people are interacting with you and what energy is coming your way.